Hi, I'm Guntower Mike, and these are my top 10 and a bit games. Now, I hesitate to call these my top 10 of all time because, as we all know, there are a ton of great games out there and there are new ones coming out all the time. So, these are basically my top 10 at the time of editing. That said, some of them are oldies but goodies that have stood the test of time, and I'm willing to bet that there are a couple of titles in here that most of you have never even heard of. The more observant of you will also have noticed that there's more than 10 games on that table. So, spoiler alert, I'm going to cheat, but not too much. So, let's get to it. At number 10 is this Pandemic Legacy. Now, I'll be honest with you, Pandemic, I could take or leave. I know a lot of people rave about it, but for me, it was just a bit meh. It didn't really grab me. And then Pandemic Legacy came along, and that grabbed me by the jugular and wouldn't let me go. It was amazing. It was like living through a film, like living through a disaster movie, with all its ups and downs and highs and lows and amazing reveals. I it's unfair share of incompetence. I mean, I still remember the time when we decided that we were going to surround our new CDC in Asia with roadblocks, only for an outbreak to occur inside the CDC, and we discovered that none of us had the cards to get over the roadblocks and escape. But that's my point. Pandemic Legacy raised what was, frankly, a so-so game into something that was completely epic and generated stories like that we still laugh over even today. And the turn to Act 3 reveal was just I loved every minute of playing this game. It only had two big problems. One was it wasn't designed for 6 players, and we at the time regularly had 6 players around the table, so I had to redesign a variant that allowed us to play with 6 players, which frankly made it a lot more difficult. And also, it's a legacy game, and a legacy game only works if you've got a group of players who are committed to sitting down and playing at least 12 versions of this game, and in our case, a lot more because frankly we were incompetent. And that's why this copy of Pandemic Legacy 2 is still languishing on my shelves, virtually unplayed, 2 years after I bought it, because we simply can't get the same group of players around the table on a regular basis to finish it. And while I'm on the subject of legacy games, permit me one slight rant about the hype, because despite all the hype surrounding legacy games, they're not new. Old school wargamers were doing it in the 1960s and probably the 1950s. D&D players were doing it in the 1970s. They just called it a campaign. And instead of a nice little tuck box that you got to open or glitzy little stickers that you stuck on the board, you simply crossed out the fortress that the orc horde had overrun, and your DM stuck a figure for the gigantic mega organ that you had just released onto the table and said, deal with it. And that brings me, not very neatly, onto my next game. Because at number 9 is this little beauty, Patton's Best. Way back in the day, 1987 to be precise, Avalon Hill produced this absolute gem of a solo game in which you play the crew of a Sherman tank, which is one tiny cog in General Patton's 4th Armored Division in its breakout from D-Day at Operation Cobra all the way through to the Rhine. And where this game shines is you play a legacy campaign in which you go from Operation Cobra all the way across the Rhine to Valkenburg on the River Saar, which is where the 4th Armored Division ended up. And because it's an old school game, there are no whistles and bells. The pieces are shonky bits of cardboard. There are no cool upgrade cards with which to pimp up your tank. There are no cool kit cards with which to kit out your crew. If you're lucky, every now and again, you get to roll a die and increase the stat of one of your crew by 1 whole point. And if you're really, really lucky, you get to upgrade your tank from a bog standard M4 into an M4A1. Or if you've really hit the jackpot and want to be anachronistic about it, a Sherman Firefly with a long barrel 75mm gun. But where this game really shines, in my opinion, is in its design for effect to make you think like a Sherman tank crew. Because read any account of Sherman tank crews in the Second World War, and this is one of the best. And what comes across is the sheer unadulterated paranoia when you hear a tank or a German gun in the battlefield. Because you are desperate to know if that is an 88mm, either a Pak 43 or an 88mm on a Tiger tank. Because if it is, and you get it wrong, you are going home in a body bag. And this game gets that feeling across absolutely superbly, in my opinion, because until you have identified it, every single gun on the battlefield is an 88mm. And so you are desperate. You will move heaven and earth to identify that gun before it kills you. And I know that really irritates a certain type of gamer, because I've had this debate multiple times where they say, but Mike, it's not an 88mm, it's a Pak 38, and that's not going to kill you. I say, yeah, but until you've identified it, you don't know that. And you have to operate under the assumption that if it gets you in its sights, you're dead. And that's how every single Sherman tank crew whose account I've ever read used to think. And that, I think, is brilliant. Now, I've got to admit, I struggled with this number 8 because there are so many great games out there. And I could very easily have done a top 20, but you don't have 20 hours to listen to me wittering on about my favourite games. So, with apologies to all these great games out there, my number 8 is King's Dilemma. King's Dilemma is another legacy game, and it suffers from all the problems I've already talked about. I mean, we haven't played it for the last 6 months because we simply can't get the right group together. But when we do play it, boy, is it worth it. You each play one of the nobles sitting on the King's High Council advising him, and every turn a card is turned over which presents you with a problem that you have to solve by voting on 2 potential solutions. None of these solutions is good because these are real grown-up problems, and often the solution causes more trouble than it solves. But that's kind of the point. This is a brilliant simulation of politics where the problems are really properly intractable, and what seems to be the most moral or ethical solution often doesn't align with your short or long-term goals, and at times just makes the problem worse. And so you're constantly trying to fix a leaking ship with a bucket full of sieves. And so you have this fascinating mix of really tough decision making that's often compromised by hard-nosed political necessity and has consequences which ripple throughout the game. It's fabulous. I'm already backed Queen's Dilemma on Kickstarter, and I can't wait to get this back onto the table again. So, on to my number 7. I've only just recently got to play this game, despite wanting to try it for a very long time, and it has instantly leapt into my top 10 because, as a piece of game design, it is a work of unadulterated genius. This is Root, and it is incredible. It doesn't just have asymmetric starting powers, it has completely asymmetric powers. And so your 4x empire building power works completely differently to the power that is run by Decree, which works completely differently to the woodland gorillas running around the forest, which is completely different to the Conan the Barbarian style role-playing hero who's wandering around having his own little adventures and every now and again influencing everything that's going on around him. It is mind-blowing. And that's just the 4 basic factions. There's a whole bunch of expansion factions out there that have equally asymmetric powers. That's incredible! And the only reason that it's not higher on my list is I've only just started to get to grips with it. I've just realised I've been playing the Eerie completely wrong, and I've got to go back and start again from scratch and figure out how to make them work. I'm really looking forward to learning the nuances of this game and figuring out how it works, because it is fantastic. And I only wish that I could design a game this good. At number 6 is a deceptive little game that has greatly influenced my design philosophy. And that's this, Legends of Andor. Now, on the surface, Legends of Andor is just a simple little adventure game where you roll dice and kill monsters. But there's a lot more going on underneath this hood than just that, believe me. Because this game is designed for you to open the box, set up the game, and start playing without ever having once read a single page of the rules. And then it just carries you through your adventure, teaching you how to play it as you go along. And that is one of the great holy grails of game design. But if that's all that was going on, it wouldn't be on this list. And I think the best way I can describe why it's on this list is by telling you about our first experience of the game. We were playing the demo at Essen, and it suddenly dawned on us that the way the timer worked, if we killed just one more monster, we were going to lose the game. But the monsters were going to overrun the castle in the next 2 turns, and there were monsters blocking our way to the objective we needed to reach to win. And so it suddenly turned on its head and turned from a simple hack and slay adventure into a really tricksy little logic puzzle that we had to solve in order to win. And that, in a nutshell, is Andor for you. But here's where I'm going to cheat, because I can't talk about Andor without also talking about Robin Hood. And with Robin Hood, Michael Menzel took everything that he'd learned from Andor and turned this into the ultimate streamlined out-of-the-box adventure that is so much fun. Everybody I've taught it to can't stop at adventure number 1. They usually have to play until adventure number 3 until they're prepared to put it down. And that's because this game isn't just a beautifully designed game, it's also oozing with theme. I mean, my favorite moment, I think, was when we discovered that if you move the hay wagon to the wall of the castle, you can use it as a crash mat for one of your heroes to jump off the ramparts and land safely and escape. And we were all, that is so Robin Hood. You've seen that happen so many times in so many of the films. And there are tons of lovely thematic little moments like that just popping up like Easter eggs out of this game. It's a lovely, lovely little game. And that's what I aspire to in my own game, Pandora Celeste. I'm trying to design a game which you can play straight out of the box, but which oozes with so much theme that you just get a laugh of recognition from those moments that you recognize from the great sci-fi movies we all watched when we were growing up. I'm always mildly surprised that I'm not a great fan of dungeon crawlers. Probably, if I'm honest, because back in the day I used to be a live action role player, and no tabletop board game or tabletop role playing game for that matter really holds a candle to the adrenaline buzz you used to get from doing it for real. But I also don't think it will surprise you to know that the one dungeon crawler I do own and absolutely love is. Bear with me 1 minute. Gloomhaven. What can I say about Gloomhaven that hasn't been said 1,000 times before? It is without doubt one of the great games of its age. Elegantly designed, beautifully produced, and with so much content in this one box that I'm never going to get through it in my lifetime, let alone Frosthaven and Jaws of the Lion and all of the other stuff that Isaac's produced. If I'm permitted to have one small gripe, it's that the stamina mechanic baked into the character cards can be a tad unforgiving at times. Let me give you an example. I'm currently running a solo campaign with a Harrow Plague Herald and a Vermling Mind Thief who tells everyone he meets, "My human name is Scum." Only problem is the Plague Herald's best cards spread poison through his allies, and the Vermling just isn't strong enough to act as a walking battery throughout the entire duration of a game. But that minor gripe aside, this is still one of the best games in my collection. And the only reason that it's not higher on the list is because my next four each hold a very dear place in my heart. A long time ago in a fantasy cottage far, far away, or deepest, darkest Kent to be exact, I sat down with my new wife Lynn and showed her the latest Euro game that I'd just bought, and then sat back and savoured her reaction, which is the same as the reaction of many on-board gamers that I've shown this game to over the years, which is, I never knew a game could be like this. This has since become one of Lynn's favourite games, if not her favourite game, and it's certainly the favourite of my mother-in-law Doreen as well. And we would sit together by the fire every Christmas and play back-to-back games of what we came to think of as mega settlers of Qatar. Now, I know that there are better resource management games than this out there. And I also know that this is really, really prone to the vagaries of the dice, but that doesn't matter. The enjoyment that we have got out of this one game is second to none. And for a long time, Doreen and I used to have an unspoken pact where she would buy me the latest Settlers expansion for Christmas on condition that I taught her how to play it. I'm one of the few people I know who genuinely enjoyed his mother-in-law coming to visit because we got to sit down and play together. And we would play this massive sprawling game of Mega Qatar with the 3D 10th anniversary edition forming the core split by the rivers of Qatar. And then all the tiles from the other games and expansions spreading out from there. I always liked to have a giant sea on one side dotted with islands. And on the other side, you had a massive desert splitting Qatar from the fertile lands beyond. And the beauty of Mega Settlers is it solves many of the problems inherent in basic Qatar. The fish and coins you get from the Fishes and River expansions grant you the resources that you need to get your settlements up and running. And the camels from the Caravan expansion help you in your race for the longest road. Plus the cry of camel that rises above the board as you call in the camel auction every time someone places a settlement never grows up. In fact, The only expansion we don't use is the Barbarians because, frankly, it turns it into a war game, and that's simply not Qatar. We even use the wagons from the Wagons and Traders expansion, though frankly they're pointless. I've only ever once won a game using a wagon strategy. But that's not the point. You don't play Settlers to win. The joy of Settlers is gathering together around a table with a game you all love, just enjoying one another's company. Doreen's passed away now, but I can see I'm going to be playing this game with Lynn long into our old age. And then after Christmas, we'll take it up to my best mates and we'll play in the new year with him and his family, playing another game of Settlers of Qatar. I'm mildly surprised that there are no Roman games on this list so far, because I'm obsessed with the Romans. If I hadn't joined the dark side and run away to make television because it paid better and was more fun, I'd have been a Roman academic, or at least tried to be. As it is, I think there aren't any Roman games on this list because despite having some very good games based on Rome, none of them quite lives up to my standards in terms of historical accuracy, with possibly one exception, and that's this. And this is on the list for two good reasons. One, it's probably Lynn's second favourite game, though there's a toss-up between that and Castles of Mad King Ludwig. And two, it's just a damn good game. Because it's another one of what Lynn would call a shopping game, packed full of player interaction. You compete as Roman impresarios, vying to put on the best show in the Coliseum to wow the audience and impress the emperor. And each turn, you compete in an auction to try and get the best performers, and then you barter with each other, exchanging the performers you don't need for the bits of scenery and the performers that you do, trying to complete your slate of performers for the show you've got to put on. And then you move around the board trying to position yourself to gain imperial medals and attract the attention of Roman bigwigs before putting on your show. And you start small with something like this. And then you graduate to something bigger, something like this. We like to call this the Lions Akimbo. Until you end up with a massive extravaganza like ISIS Revealed Secrets, because every Roman audience likes a girly show. And one of the really clever things about this game is, rather like board game audiences, the Roman audience was always wowed by the cult of the new. And so you're always trying to put on a brand new show so that you can turn your old show over and gain the audience bonus for innovation. And I think that's really quite elegant. In fact, there's only really one thing wrong with this game, and that's this. Because Rotarius versus Secutor was not a chariot race. It was a knockdown drag-out fight between the two great classic gladiator types of the Roman Coliseum. And the only way that I can reconcile myself with this tile is that the stars of the show would almost certainly have been brought into the Coliseum on chariots. But frankly, if this is the only thing that's wrong with this game, it's damn near perfect, and that is why it's number 3 on my list. I'm going to admit to something, which, if it doesn't get me burned at the stake, will at least get me ejected from the epic sci-fi fan club. Because, try as I might, and believe me, I really have tried, I just don't like Twilight Imperium. I know. What am I thinking? I'm an avid sci-fi fan. Dune's one of my favourite books, and this is supposed to be the epic sci-fi fantasy game to end all epic sci-fi fantasy games, full of political intrigue, exotic alien races, and magnificent epic space battles. Except it isn't. What it is with literally hours of tedious downtime. And when it finally gets round to your turn, your two choices, if you want to actually try and win the game, are one, take Imperial and score 2 VPs, and two, if you can't take Imperial, take Initiative so you can take Imperial next turn. And so you're faced with the invidious choice of either playing to win or choosing to have fun. And that just sucks. I think Quinn's hit the nail on the head in his special on Twilight Imperium when he said, it's not actually a space opera. What it is a Cold War where your fleets are so devastating that nobody actually dares to use them. And while that for him was a huge plus, for me it's a massive turn-off. But then, in 2011, a game came along which said, don't worry, Mike. You don't have to try to like Twilight Imperium anymore, because I'm here for you, and I will put Twilight Imperium into the shade, because I am Eclipse. Do you see what I did there? For me, Eclipse is everything Twilight Imperium isn't, and for one thing, it takes half as long to play, but it also combines clever Euro engine building with classic Amerigame dice battles. And while those dice battles do involve you rolling handfuls of dice, which I should absolutely hate because my dice luck is atrocious, where Eclipse really shines is the way it uses its fleet management mechanics to enable you to mitigate and manipulate your dice luck. Each turn you're presented with a slate of technologies you can buy, and some of those are upgrades that you can attach to the ship plans on your fleet board. And what they allow you to do is change your dice luck. So if, like me, you know that you're bound to roll low when you need to roll high, you invest in targeting computers that increase the score of each die. Or if you're going up against Mr. Green, who always rolls high, you invest in shields, which takes his score down. Doesn't stop him rolling natural sixes, but you can counter that by investing in plasma torpedoes, which allow you to get the drop on it. And all of this lets you shape your fleets to the way that you like to play. And then, even more importantly, you get to use them. It also scales very well. While I've never actually played it with 2, I've had equally enjoyable experiences playing with 3 as I have playing with 9. And there's a very clever mechanic with a 9-player game that allows 2 players to play simultaneously, so it actually has the duration of a 4 or 5-player game. So you don't have to sit through 8 hours of tedium waiting for something to actually happen. You really do get to play the space opera of your dreams. And that is why Eclipse is my number 2 game. And so we come to my number 1 game, which for anyone who's watched the first in my board game pitch series should come as no surprise, because as one commentator put it, that piss take was done with an awful lot of love. And so my number 1 game has been, for many, many years, Scythe. Scythe is an absolutely beautiful game, not just in its design, but in its aesthetic. because Jamie Stegmaier freely admits that he based the design upon the work of his artist, Jakob Rosalski. And the result is a sumptuous mix of Euro engine building and resource management with a war game that has some beautiful little balancing mechanics baked into the design. Now, I could wax on forever about the brilliance of Scythe's design, but I'm going to limit myself to just one example, and my friends are already rolling their eyes because they know where I'm going with this. When you do the upgrade action, what you do is you take a cube from the top of your action board and you place it anywhere you like at the bottom of your action board. And that one simple action opens up such a plethora of possibilities. It's quite incredible because it frees up an extra option at the top and reduces the cost of one of your options at the bottom. And so that one simple decision defines your strategy for the rest of the game. It's just so beautifully elegant. That is so much of this game. I absolutely love it, which is a surprise since I'm completely crap at it. I've lost track of the amount of times I've played this game, and I can count on the fingers of one hand the amount of times I've won, and it's not 5. But that really doesn't matter, because if you've learned anything from this video, it's that what really does matter to me is the design of the game. And this game is just beautifully, beautifully designed. So that's it. Those are my top 10 games, and this is my number 1. If you want to see me poke fun at this, then check out my board game pitch in the links coming up shortly. I hope you've learned something about why I like the games I like and how they've influenced my design philosophy. And if you like what you've heard, then please do check out my game Pandora Celeste, which I'm hoping to crowdfund sometime in the new year. And next year, I'm planning to do a few more board game pitches and a few more videos about Pandora Celeste. So if you want to check those out, then you know what to do. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.